An American engineer is talking with a European colleague during a break. The conversation begins normally enough: their jobs, years of experience, and the projects they are working on. Then the American casually mentions his salary. The European colleague freezes. He asks him to repeat the number, as if he must have heard it wrong. With that level of income, he assumes the American standing in front of him must be a department head, a senior executive, or at least someone managing dozens of employees. But he is not. He is just an ordinary engineer. The same thing happens with nurses, financial professionals, mid-level managers, and many other skilled workers in the United States. The same qualifications, the same years of experience, sometimes even the same kind of work. Yet when their paychecks are placed side by side, the gap can reach tens of thousands of dollars a year. So why is the same person's skill valued differently simply because they are standing on opposite sides of the Atlantic? Does America truly reward workers more fairly, or is Europe quietly falling behind? At first glance, this looks like a clear victory for Americans, but a paycheck tells you only half the story. Because once we trace where that money actually goes, the line between winners and losers begins to look far less clear. The same job, two completely different paychecks. And when real paychecks are placed side by side, the silence in the room is no longer just a detail created for the headline. Start with technology, the industry where the gap is easiest to see. At Amazon, an SDE2 software engineer in the New York area earns total compensation of around $301,000 a year, including salary, stock, and bonuses. At the same company and the same level in London, the reported figure is around £130,000. Both cities are expensive. Both employees may write similar code, face the same performance reviews, and report within the same global system. Yet where they sit can still dramatically change the value of their compensation package. The gap does not exist only in technology offices. A registered nurse in the United States earns a median salary of about $93,600 a year. In the UK's NHS, many frontline nurses in Band 5 receive a base salary of roughly £31,000 to nearly £38,000. Of course, the two healthcare systems are not the same, and pounds cannot be compared directly with dollars without considering exchange rates, taxes, or benefits. But the sense of shock is still understandable. This is not a difference of a few thousand. It is a gap large enough to change how someone sees the value of their own profession. Even jobs that do not require you to work in a glass office tower show a similar pattern. Electricians in the United States earn a median salary of about $62,350 a year. In the United Kingdom, the commonly published salary range for the profession is around £26,000 to £45,000. In finance, engineering, and operations management, bonuses, commissions, and stock compensation in the United States can widen the gap even further. But to make the comparison fair, we cannot place an executive in Manhattan next to an entry-level worker in a small European town. We need to compare the same occupation, similar experience, a comparable level of seniority, and major cities with other major cities. When we do that, the gap does not disappear completely. The United States does not pay more than every European country in every profession and at every level. But for many skilled jobs, from technology and finance to healthcare, engineering, and the skilled trades, America's wage advantage is real. And that is when the question becomes more uncomfortable. What is it about the US economy that allows the same skill to be valued so much more highly? How much higher are US wages, really? But before concluding that the United States has won the wage race, we need to clarify one thing. Not every income figure tells the same story. First, there is the average wage. This figure is calculated by adding up everyone's income and dividing the total equally. The problem is that a relatively small group of executives, doctors, or technology professionals earning hundreds of thousands of dollars can significantly pull up the national average. That is why the median wage is often closer to the experience of an ordinary worker. It is the figure in the middle. Half earn more and half earn less. It is not distorted as heavily by extremely high incomes, but even the median wage is not enough. $1 in Texas does not buy the same amount as $1 in New York, and $50,000 in Paris does not provide the same standard of living as £50,000 in a smaller city. That is why economists also adjust income for purchasing power, the amount of housing, food, transportation, and services that the money can actually buy. When we look through all three of these layers, the the United States does not outperform every European country. Switzerland, Luxembourg, and some Nordic economies may match or even surpass the US under certain comparisons. But when the United States is compared with most of the United Kingdom, France, Italy, Spain, and many other European economies, especially in technology, finance, healthcare, and engineering, the gap remains clear. The exact numbers may change depending on how they are measured, but America's wage advantage does not disappear entirely. What machine is driving US wages higher? That gap does not exist because American companies are more generous. It is created by an economic machine capable of turning capital, technology, and skills into revenue on a massive scale. According to the IMF, the total market value of US companies less than 50 years old has reached about $42.9 trillion, compared with only around $5 trillion in the European Union. An American company that has been operating for at least 25 years has an average of roughly 70 employees, while a comparable European company has only about 10. The easier it is for a company to scale, the more revenue it has available to pay for critical skills. The United States is also home to many technology, financial, and pharmaceutical giants capable of generating enormous profit pools. In 2025 alone, profits from the current production of US corporations reached about $4.08 trillion. When an engineer helps launch a product earlier, a financial specialist prices risk more accurately, or a researcher brings a new drug closer to market, paying tens of thousands of dollars more to secure the right person can be a worthwhile investment. Behind them is a much deeper pool of capital. The European Central Bank estimates that venture capital funds in the United States have a combined size of around $930 billion, compared with $150 billion in the EU, and invest roughly 6 times more. That funding allows companies to pursue risky projects, hire before becoming profitable, and use stock compensation or bonuses to attract talent away from competitors. For workers, this creates a particular kind of power, the power to leave. In June 2026, the Atlanta Fed reported that wages for job switchers were up about 4.1% from a year earlier, compared with roughly 3.4% for those who stayed in their jobs. When employees are willing to move to another company, employers have to pay closer to the market rate to retain them. The underlying factor is still productivity. In 2024, US labor productivity grew by 2.2%, while the EU recorded growth of only 0.2%, measured by the value created per hour worked. The EU stood at only about 3/4 of the US level. That does not mean Americans are smarter or work harder. It means they often work within a system that has more capital, stronger technology, and a greater ability to turn 1 hour of labor into revenue. When a company needs your skills today, it does not pay you based on how many hours you sit in an office. It pays you based on how much value those skills can create. But a higher paycheck also reflects another cost. The highest paying industries often come with demanding targets, income tied to bonuses or stock, and constant pressure to prove your value. Part of the salary is a reward for productivity. The rest is the price of risk and instability. The American machine can push incomes very high, but it does not lift everyone at the same speed. Why are European wages growing more slowly? If the American machine delivers higher wages through scale, capital, and speed, Europe is built around a different priority: stability. For many years, that trade-off worked fairly well. Workers accepted lower salaries in exchange for more vacation time, stronger employment contracts, more accessible healthcare, and a lower risk of losing their jobs. Companies could not hire and fire employees as quickly as they could in the United States. Workers were also under less pressure to keep switching jobs simply to make sure their income kept pace with the market. But that stability comes with a limit. Productivity has grown more slowly in many European economies, while Europe still has fewer technology companies capable of expanding globally than the United States. Europe does not lack talented engineers, scientists, or entrepreneurs. What it often lacks is a market unified enough to turn a small company into a corporate giant. A business trying to expand from France into Germany, Italy, or Spain may have to deal with different regulations, tax systems, and labor markets. Capital is also divided among many countries. When companies grow more slowly, earn lower profits, and struggle to raise funding, they also find it harder to offer the same salaries, stock compensation, and bonuses as their American competitors. The cost of hiring also goes far beyond the salary itself. Payroll taxes, social security contributions, and employee protection obligations mean that the total cost of each position can be much higher than the amount workers see on their paychecks. That does not mean the European model is wrong. It gives workers a level of security that many Americans do not have. But as economic growth slows, populations age, and skilled workers gain the ability to move somewhere that pays more, that trade-off becomes increasingly expensive. Europe chose to protect stability rather than maximize wages. The question now is whether that stability will remain attractive enough as the income gap continues to widen. If Americans earn so much, why do they still feel short of money? At this point, America seems to have won. You may be an engineer, nurse, or mid-level manager earning a salary large enough to make your European colleagues ask whether they heard you correctly. The number on the job offer is impressive. The money deposited into your account each month is completely real. Then life begins taking its share. First comes rent. In 2024, median rent in the United States, including some utility costs, was about $1,487 per month. Nearly $17,150 a year, for the typical renter household that consumed around 31% of income. In cities where many high-paying jobs are concentrated, the figure is often even higher. Moving farther away may reduce housing costs, but it also brings car payments, insurance, fuel, and repair expenses. The money saved on rent sometimes simply moves from one bill to another. Then comes health insurance. In 2025, the average total premium for employer-sponsored family coverage was nearly $27,000 a year. Employers paid most of it, but workers still contributed an average of about $6,850, equivalent to $571 per month. For individual plans with deductibles, the average deductible was also close to $1,900. That means you may already be paying for insurance every month and still hesitate before going to the hospital. An ambulance ride, a medical scan, or an unexpected treatment can still wipe out your savings. If you have children, the pressure rises another level. The US Department of Labor says full-time childcare for one child can cost roughly $6,500 to $15,600 a year, depending on the child's age, the type of care, and the location. In some places, sending an infant to a childcare center costs more than the median rent. With 2 young children, daycare can feel like a second mortgage. Then there is tuition and student debt. Many high-paying jobs require years of education, but before the first paycheck ever arrives, workers may already be carrying a large amount of debt. A higher income is not always entirely a reward. Sometimes it is paying back the cost of an expensive education. Even time has a price. After 1 year on the job, private sector workers with paid vacation commonly receive only about 5 to 14 days off per year. They earn more, but they often live with the feeling that they cannot afford to stop for too long. And here is the number that brings everything back to reality. In 2025, only 63% of American adults said they could cover an unexpected $400 expense entirely with cash, savings, or the equivalent. More than 1/3 would have to borrow, sell something, or find another way to pay. Around 12% said they would not be able to cover the expense by any means. That is why an American can earn $80,000, $100,000 or more a year and still not feel wealthy. They may be only one surgery, one job loss, or one broken down car away from a financial crisis. American paychecks are higher because they do not only pay for the work you do, they also have to buy healthcare, transportation, childcare, time off, and security for the future. Europeans look at the paycheck. Americans look at what is left after every bill has been paid. The average is hiding 2 Americas. But even after subtracting housing, insurance, and monthly bills, there is still a bigger problem. There is no single salary that represents all Americans. In 2025, the median weekly earnings of full-time workers in the United States were about $1,204, equal to more than $62,000 for someone working throughout the year. But that only represents the person standing exactly in the middle. Half earn more, half earn less. Now step into 2 very different workplaces. In a technology office, a full-time software developer earns a median of about $2,506 per week. In management, business, and financial occupations, the median is around $1,760. A physician may earn more than $3,000 per week, not including highly specialized positions or additional bonuses. This is the America the world often sees. Brightly lit offices, billion-dollar companies, and compensation packages large enough to astonish many Europeans. But walk just a few blocks and a different America appears. A full-time retail worker earns a median of about $913 per week. For waiters and waitresses, the figure is only around $662. Home health aides, people who help older adults bathe, eat, and live safely every day, earn about $752 per week. They live in the same housing market. They buy food at the same stores, pay the same prices for gas, and face medical bills that are not any smaller simply because their incomes are lower. This is why averages can mislead you. Place 4 people earning $40,000 a year next to 1 person earning $300,000. The group's average income immediately rises to $92,000, but 4 out of those 5 people have never seen a salary anywhere near that amount. The United States has many people earning extraordinary incomes. They pull the national average upward, making the country look wealthier than the everyday experience of most workers. That is why the median wage is often a more honest mirror. It shows what the person in the middle actually takes home, rather than allowing a small group of extremely high earners to define everyone else. This does not erase America's wage advantage. It simply shows that the advantage is distributed very unevenly. An engineer may look at Europe and see that their salary is clearly higher, but a restaurant worker, cashier, or caregiver may watch the same video and ask, where is the wealthy America everyone keeps talking about in my paycheck? 2 Americas exist at the same time. One America has an almost unlimited income ceiling, and the other is still trying not to fall through the floor beneath it. So what is the truth that embarrasses Europe? By this point, you may have realized that the truth is not simply that Americans are rich while Europeans are poor. Europe was never competing solely to produce the biggest paychecks. For decades, it accepted lower incomes in exchange for more accessible healthcare, more vacation time, greater job security, and a social safety net strong enough to keep workers from carrying every risk on their own. That was once an attractive trade-off. But that trade-off is becoming more expensive. From 2015 to the end of 2025, home prices across the European Union rose by nearly 65%, while rents increased by around 22%. As housing, food, and energy consume a larger share of household income, the promise of lower pay but a safer life begins to lose its appeal. Welfare can help you when you get sick. It does not automatically help a young person buy their first home. And this is where the uncomfortable part begins. Europe has talented engineers, outstanding scientists, and ambitious founders. Yet many European companies still struggle when they need large amounts of capital, want to expand across borders, or try to compete with American companies on salaries. European businesses' share of global market capitalization has fallen from around 25% to just 12% over the past 2 decades. A study published by the European Commission and the European Investment Bank also found that startups often move part of their operations outside the EU to gain access to investment capital, a larger unified market, and more experienced commercial teams. In some cases, American investors themselves encourage these companies to move their legal headquarters or management operations abroad. And when companies, capital, and growth opportunities move, talent often has a reason to follow. Even more concerning, EU labour productivity has grown about 0.5 percentage points more slowly than in the United States each year on average since 2000. That gap may sound small in a single year, but when it compounds over 2 decades, it becomes a gap in profits, investment, and eventually wages. That is the real embarrassment. Not that Europeans work less effectively, but that some people are doing the same jobs with similar skills and being paid significantly less, while the system that once compensated for that difference is increasingly struggling against the rising cost of living. Europe still has a valuable safety floor, but if the income ceiling keeps falling, more and more people will begin to ask whether that floor is still strong enough to make them stay. Who really lives better? After all the numbers about salaries, taxes, and the cost of living, the final question still remains. Do Americans or Europeans actually live better? The answer depends heavily on who you are. If you are an engineer, doctor, financial professional, or high-earning manager who is healthy and does not yet depend heavily on social support programs, the United States may offer a very clear advantage. You may be paid more, advance faster, and have greater opportunities to earn bonuses, receive stock compensation, or build wealth at a pace that is difficult to match across much of Europe. In that situation, the American system gives you a very tall ladder. The more scarce your skills are, the more companies are willing to pay to hire you. If everything goes well, that income gap can become large enough to offset insurance, housing, and other expenses. But the picture changes when you have young children, live with a chronic illness, or regularly need medical care. A family in the United States may earn more on paper but still have to spend thousands of dollars each year on insurance, childcare, and unexpected expenses. Meanwhile, in many European countries, public healthcare, paid parental leave, family benefits, and more affordable education can create a sense of security that does not appear on a paycheck. They may earn less, but an illness or the birth of another child is less likely to turn into a financial crisis. For low-income workers, the answer is even more complicated. A retail employee in a small American city may live better than someone doing the same job in an expensive European capital. But if rent is high, public transportation is poor, and the worker does not receive good employer-sponsored insurance, the wage advantage can disappear very quickly. The city you live in, the number of children you have, your health, your rent, your taxes, and the support system around you can all change the outcome. That is why there is no absolute winner. The United States often offers greater opportunities to those who are able to climb higher. Europe often provides stronger protection for those at risk of falling. One side builds a higher ceiling, the other tries to keep the floor stronger. And a better life depends not only on how much money you can earn, but also on how much security you need in order to live without constantly fearing that you could lose everything. Two different definitions of a good life. In the end, this debate has never been only about who receives the bigger number on their paycheck. The United States is built to maximize opportunity. If you have the right skills, are willing to compete, and are prepared to take risks, the system can push your income to a level that most of Europe struggles to match. Europe has chosen a different promise. You may earn less, but when you get sick, have a child, lose your job, or enter old age, society will try to keep you from falling too far. America gives you a higher ceiling. Europe tries to build a stronger floor, but a high ceiling does not mean much if you are constantly afraid of falling. And a secure floor is also difficult to maintain if the economy does not generate enough growth, opportunity, and wages for the next generation. That is why there is no single right answer for everyone. What about you? Would you choose a higher salary while taking on more risk yourself, or a smaller paycheck in exchange for more time and security? Share your choice in the comments.